Hey there, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jenna Chouinard, Head of Marketing at PCA Technology Group, and I'll be your host for this webinar. Before I hand it over to your speaker today, Brian Powell, CTO and Certified Ethical Hacker at PCA, we want to just thank you again for joining us in this quick 30-minute dive into important cybersecurity topics. We understand there are so many evolving parts to cybersecurity, and we're here to help educate and really just highlight the most important things that you need to know, which takes us to today's topic, unleashing the value of risk assessments. So this webinar will be recorded, and you can keep a lookout for a follow-up email with the recording and some additional resources for your reference. And as we go through the presentation, if you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to drop them in the chat, and we'll make sure to get those answered for you before we conclude today. But with that being said, I'd now like to hand it over to Brian Powell from PCA.
Thank you, Jenna. I appreciate it. So as Jenna mentioned, Brian, CTO here at PCA Technology Group, and we're going to talk a little bit about why risk assessments are important, what they kind of are, what they cover, just to kind of give you a background of exactly what it's all about. So just some agenda here. We're going to cover, first of all, you got to go over the security frameworks or standards just to kind of build that foundation to show what these risk assessments are kind of building off of. So we'll go over the brief foundational overview, some common types that are out there. We'll also cover the NIST 6 elements, and anybody that is familiar, used to be 5 elements. It just recently got updated to 6 elements. We'll cover that. And then we'll dive a little deeper into the risk assessment, what it is, why it's important, some of the controls, how it's looked at, the matrix, also and the roadmaps to go along with that. So we'll get right at it. So first things first, obviously you have to start, in order to build a decent house, you have to start with a solid foundation. So that's kind of the same premise of a risk assessment. You have to have some type of good foundational, either a framework or standards that you're going to be leveraging or following to make sure that you have something to look at. And it's a stable foundation. So a security framework basically is just that. It defines policies, procedures for establishing and maintaining security controls, which is what you're going to be evaluating with that risk assessment. And then the frameworks also clarify processes used to protect the organization from cybersecurity risks. And they also assist any internal staff or third parties to make sure that their organizations are either in compliant or on the road to improving their security based on the outcome of an actual risk assessment. So here's a listing of some of the more common security frameworks that we'll probably run into, at least in this side. Some of them are more enterprise level. However, you have your SOC 2s, which are companies that manage hosted data, our customer data. ISO 27001. It could be any type of company data. NIST CSF, which is the one that we'll be covering and basically referring to throughout this presentation. That's the more common one. Sometimes there's another one at the bottom here that we cover too, which is just a subset of NIST. But NIST is pretty much available for anybody. HIPAA. That's obviously more healthcare sector oriented, protecting patient health information. PCI DSS is payment card information. So anybody that processes any type of credit card payments would be following that standard. GPDR is the European privacy implementation that they have. If you do have if you're collecting any type of data on your website and it could potentially be opened or viewed by a European citizen, you have to abide by this too, and allow them to have that privacy. HITRUST CSF is another healthcare sector one. Built kind of at the same time with HIPAA, so there's kind of subset rules that go along with that. It actually is an addition to the HIPAA side. COBIT is usually publicly traded companies. Usually, NERSIP is utility and power sector, so it definitely handles most of the bulk of the utility side of things. FISMA is obviously federal government. NIST 853 is also government agency, so it's built around the NIST CSF, but this is geared more towards federal. And then the NIST 800 171 is the same thing. It's built around federal agencies, but geared more towards their contractors and subcontractors. So if you do work for the government or provide services to the government as a subcontractor, that's the one you would probably be following. The IAB CCPA is California, is based around California. Again, it's much like the GPDR. However, it's built specifically for California citizens, residents. And then the final one here is CIS controls. That one is basically it's more of a scaled down version. So if you're a client of ours, technically you are really following the CIS controls. It is a subset and maps directly to NIST. However, it is not as large as NIST. So a lot of our small and medium businesses tend to find the CIS controls more fathomable instead of taking that big bite out of the NIST CSF. So we'll show you a little bit about that here real shortly as we get into the risk assessment. So those are the foundations, at least some of them. It's either frameworks or standards that are pretty much followed. And the risk assessment that we're going to kind of be talking about can map or relate to most, if not all of those in some way, shape, or form. So that brings us to the NIST CSF. As I mentioned, it used to be 5, which are the outer ring there, the identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. That 6th element is something that they just added with the 2.0 release. And basically what it is it's one of those situations where they found that the framework itself, the 5 layers of the framework itself was great. However, if you don't add that govern or governance part of it, really that covers to make sure that executive levels and higher ups are actually living and breathing this. So they found that the framework was great, but if it wasn't being pushed down from the top or managed from the top, a lot of this stuff either fell to the wayside or wasn't really being followed the way it should, and it was simply a checkbox. So that's why they added that governance piece. So it adds responsibilities and oversight at the senior management level, whether it's a board or whether it's a CEO or however your organization is structured. That's kind of how this was designed to be implemented with that governance piece. So that leads us on to what is a risk assessment. So basically what a risk assessment is, it looks at your entire organization, not just from a technical side, but from administrative side, policies. It looks at physical sides, and how you're living and breathing throughout your organization. It looks at the risks related to those. It also creates a way of reviewing your controls in a standard and consistent method that is also replicable across various different industries. It also evaluates you based on what some of the industries, common other companies that are in your industry, and see how you rank. It's a method to measure, roadmap, and track your organizational risks. So whatever is the outcome of this, basically you could come up with a roadmap on how to address those. You can assign those. You can track your progress throughout the platform and show that you are making some progress. It's also a method of evaluating existing policies and procedures if you do have those, or it will shed light on the ones that you don't have, and just make sure that they're complete and accurate into their entirety, and that they're being reviewed on a regular basis, which is part of the whole process. So why do you need risk assessments? Well, the biggest thing is you can't protect what you don't know. So you may think you're doing everything great, and your IT department is humming along. Your employees are good. Your HR seems to be good. However, there could be things that you're not seeing or not thinking about, and that's what a risk assessment will look at. Like, as I mentioned, it looks at the entire organization. It could be a physical security thing. It could be just a policy, and there's a lot of different questions that happen, and kind of shed light on things. So the only way that you can detect cyber events really is making sure that you know what to look for. So if you're not looking for it, you may not be able to act accordingly in fast enough times to stop a major event from happening. So that's basically the background behind it. It does evaluate more than IT, so a lot of people do think this is all IT oriented. What I found in most cases is the IT is actually the strong part, believe it or not. So most of the time, if you have an internal IT or your external IT, most of the time that is actually doing fairly well. It's usually the policies and things like that that usually bring the risk assessment down sometimes because one, you may not know you need certain policies, or two, you're not updating them on a frequent basis and looking at them. So in general, that's usually the way it is. It's usually on the administrative side, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here shortly. But it's usually on that side. So you may need it for insurance. So a lot of times, with the new cyber insurance policies that are coming out now, they may require you to do a risk assessment of some sort or another in order to renew your policy. The other thing is perhaps compliance. As I mentioned, if you are a contractor for a federal agency or a federal government, sometimes they will ask you to do risk assessments too because they want to know where you stand, because you could potentially be accessing government information. Whether it's classified or not, it's another one of those situations where they might require you if you're held with one of those standards. And it also, again, it's a standardized way to help you build roadmaps, tracking problems, and show remediation steps that you have taken and document that. So in the event that anything does happen, if you're in the middle of this, you're not going to be able to fix everything at once. You've got to kind of plan out how you're going to do this. But part of a legal thing is showing, are you doing your due diligence? And if you're showing progress, you may have a long way to go, but if you're at least showing progress through something like a risk assessment, then you will at least be able to legally say you are showing due diligence, which will a lot of times will help you in if something were to come in a legal situation. So there's a couple of different controls that this does look at. So as I mentioned, this isn't technical only. So it does look at administrative. It looks at physical. It looks at internal technical, and then also external technical. So, the administrative is really the people, the processes, policies, anything you've got going on like that. Physical is locations. It could look at cameras, lighting, locks, HVAC, fire suppression, all that. Internal technical is really the IT behind or inside the firewall. So it's pretty much inside your facility usually, or if you have multiple entities, we would look at each one of those entities and evaluate that on a separate basis. And then external technical is obviously anything internet facing, anything that may or may not be on the dark web about you, or anything we can find with this industry likes acronyms. So OSINT is basically open source intelligence. It's basically anything about you on the public internet that could be found or maybe looked at that could provide useful information. So that's pretty much the four control areas that the risk assessment does look at. So we'll get a little bit deeper into what some of those things are. So this is just a quick high overview of you can see in the administrative controls, it looks at risk management. It looks at, now keep in mind there are we provide 3 levels of risk assessment. If you have never done a risk assessment before and you're just starting off, we always recommend starting off at a level 1. And basically, these would be examples of some of the controls that are in a level 1. Level 2 has these areas, but it also expands the amount that it looks at in each one of these areas. So you might have might be 150 sections that you have to go through for level 1. The level 2 might be 300, and a level 3 which would be maybe 450 to 500. So you can see, as you go, it starts to become very, very large. So we don't want you to start off at a level 3. We usually start out at a level 1. If you end up scoring well at a level 1, you can bump it to a level 2. It just feeds off of what you already did and just adds some additional areas to look at. But you can see it's risk management, information security, government, human resources. It looks at that, asset management, access controls, encryption, security operations, incident management, business continuity management and compliance. Those are the basic areas, and then it digs deeper into those based on how far it goes with some of these subsections in those areas there. Physical controls looks at crime indexes, natural disasters, if you're in any high crime area or a natural disaster area, flood zone or anything like that. It looks at facility security and also some of the equipment and information that are in there. Those are the areas from the physical side. And then technical controls, it looks at connectivity, remote access, directory services, servers and storage, client systems, mobile devices, logging and alerting or monitoring, vulnerability management, and then also your backup and recovery. And then finally, the external technical controls really covers your best practices, your potential reconnaissance. As I mentioned, is using that OSINT or open source intelligence to see if there's anything out there that could be found out about you, enumeration, and then vulnerability. So basically, we're looking at what can we find from the outside, either through your firewall, at your firewall, on the web, anything from your website, potentially from your social media thing. That's kind of what it all looks at, because that's what the bad guys look at too. So we evaluate all that to see what we can find and then report back on that. So basically what happens is after you go through that risk assessment piece and going through all those controls and answering questions, doing scans, doing walkthroughs, basically at the end of that, you're presented with a score. And that score with the system that we use, we use a system that a platform that scores it based on it relates directly to like a credit rating. So at 350 to 800, and basically it's one of those situations, or actually it's 300 to 850, I'm sorry. But it goes from obviously the bottom to the top, and then you can kind of see where you fall based on how that works there. And then once you get that score, you end up with a listing of areas that need improvement, and then you got to go through and figure out, okay, do I the risk? Do I want to mitigate the risk? And then once you make that decision, you will come up with a roadmap on, okay, how long and how fast do we want to do this? Some of it might be low hanging fruit. That might be an easy thing, oh, hey, you know what? We got a security policy and we just haven't reviewed it in years. Maybe I just go through that and review that. Maybe that's something easy to do if it's still applicable. Maybe it's a bigger bite to chew because you know what? Oh, well, when we created that, we were at this location with 2 employees, and now we're 900 employees at a huge factory or a huge facility. Your situation may change, but basically the way you do that is you can see on the risk matrix side here is that you really want to kind of figure out what is the best use of your time and kind of rank these based on this risk matrix. So obviously the likelihood of something happening because of that risk is on the left-hand side here, and across the bottom is the impact if it were to happen. So if technically what you would like to do is kind of stay in the shaded areas here. Obviously if something is highly likely, but it's really low impact, it's not, you may want to address it, but it's probably, I would spend more time on the shaded areas because it has more impact if it were to happen. So that's kind of how this risk and roadmap works. And I'll show you a little bit deeper here on the next slide. So we have here, as I mentioned, it goes from 3 to 850, and each one of these sections would be scored overall. So you can see, at the bottom here, this is administrative controls. It's fallen in the poor section. Physical controls would be followed in the fair. Then internal technical is good, and external is almost perfect. So, but it falls in the excellent. So you can see it shows you. Once you go through here, this is obviously a hypothetical, but maybe you rank in the good part. However, across the industry, based on what your industry is, you fall below what the average would be, and they're obviously a little higher here, but there would be scores directly related to this, and shows you exactly what it would be. And then as you go through here on the side, this is focused on the administrative side of things. Just an example shows you where you rank score wise. So you can see policies here is ranking poor. It's probably because you either don't have policies or you don't review the policies. And obviously, if you fix those situations and you go back and reevaluate this area, then your score would increase, which in overall would affect your overall score at the end. So in the individual sections here, you can see, the red obviously is things that need to be worked on. Red and orange would be areas to definitely focus on if it's something that can be done. So screening, you're probably not doing background checks on your people, and you're not evaluating things like that. So it does look at all that information. So this would be after the fact. So basically on the previous screen here, so some of these areas that maybe are ranking poor, what ends up happening is it creates a matrix here of things to do. And it shows you, it might be hard to see because it's kind of small here, but it shows you the amount of points that you would actually get to. One thing I caution, during the roadmap, don't always look for the one that gets you the highest points because you may not be the best thing to tackle at that point. Sometimes it might be, but the other thing too is if you're presenting this, your progress, they're going to see a huge spike and then all of a sudden it's going to flatten out. They're going to think you're not doing anything. So you might want to show steady progress instead based on this. But, obviously if you engage us to do one of these, this is something that we walk you through and help you with. We're not physically doing the steps a lot of times. That's actually a different type of engagement, but we definitely help you get your feet underneath you and create this roadmap so you're on the right path to evaluating this. So in closing, obviously risk assessments do drive security programs. So if it's not something that you have done, highly recommend considering it. And it's one of those things where, again, you can't really protect what you don't know. So risk assessments do provide not only where you're currently at, but also where you need to go, and how you'll get there. So it also allows you to determine the potential costs that are involved in that. So in that road mapping piece, you'll be able to evaluate, okay, how much is it going to cost us to get from here to done? It might be, you can put attach dollar figures to that based on, oh, well, you know what, I've got old, outdated, antiquated servers that are out of date and I need to upgrade them. Okay, well, you got to make investments in that, in the equipment and stuff, and the labor to potentially do that. But it allows you to at least figure out where you're at. And without a risk assessment, you're pretty much assuming what you're doing is good enough, and is your company reputation really worth that assumption? So with that, that's all I have. Hopefully this was enlightening and quick, short, to the point type of presentation for you. And I'm not sure if there's any questions here, but let's see here. Yep,
Looks
hold
like we
on.
do have one, Brian. Yep.
Yep, give me a second. I got to bring my chat up. It hit on me.
Perfect.
Yes. So how often should you perform a risk assessment and at what point do you move on? So what I usually recommend, if you've never done one, obviously get that first one under your belt, and see where you end up on the scoring rank thing. Typically, if you do a level 1 and you end up scoring decent up in the the blue or the green area, we would probably just turn that into a level 2, depending on where the other ones fall. I mean, if you have a really bad section here, let me just jump back here. Like if you ranking really good on the physical, internal, and external, but you're really poor on the administrative, I would really focus on getting that administrative piece resolved before you jump up to the next level, because this will hold you back. That's really what it is. So it depends on how you score. If you do score great across all these areas, I would recommend, obviously if we're doing the assessment for you, I would jump you right to a level 2. So everything we already did for a level 1 would just transfer, and it would just open up some more areas for us to look at. You're always going to be looking at this. So even if you're doing a level 3, so let's say you are doing a level 3 and you're scoring fairly well, I would do them probably once every year, maybe once every other year. Yearly is good if you can do it, but that's kind of how I would recommend doing it. It's really, there's no clear-cut answer on the frequency, but I would definitely say you should be analyzing it at least yearly, because that's how you should be reviewing your policies anyways, to make sure that's being done. So.
Okay, awesome. Great question. I also just dropped the link to register for the next event on April 23rd. So that's going to be all about artificial intelligence. So feel free to sign up and share that with your team. If you think of some questions later on, or if you would like to have a conversation with PCA, please email us directly at info@pcatg.com and we'll make sure to get back to you. But I'll jump back to the chat here. It doesn't look like there's any other questions at this time. So again, keep a lookout for the webinar recording and the resources. And any final thoughts from you, Brian?
Yeah, just, as I mentioned, you can't protect what you don't know, and this will definitely help you see exactly what is going on in there. So, we'd be happy to help you walk through this process if it's something you're interested in. So.
Absolutely. Awesome. All right. Thanks again, everyone, and we'll be in touch.
Have a great day.
Have a good day. Bye.